Thank you, brother. Afternoon, everybody. Wow, we got to work on the enthusiasm as we go. Okay, so the title I wanted to submit is Forage-Livestock Systems Feeding the World of 2050. And so I'm coming at this with the idea that I've got a whole lot of young professionals at various stages in that development career. And you know, we've got some goals that people have set in all deference to Justin and his comments yesterday. But before I get into that, it's fair for you to know who's talking to you. I think some disclosures will help us understand where information's coming from. So I'm an advocate for what I've trained myself to call therapeutic carbohydrate reduction and ruminant animal agriculture. This is largely the result of my own personal experience and the research that I've done over the last 13, 14 years. I work in forage agriculture currently, and I've worked in forage agriculture for most of my adult life. I currently work for a forage seed company. You should not treat anything that I say necessarily as the official policy and opinion of Barenbrug USA, but I'm working on them. And I'm a member of several organizations, and likewise, I'm not here as a spokesperson for those organizations, but I'm working on them. And above all, nothing that I say should be treated as medical advice, but I'm happy to introduce you to physicians. So again, this challenge that's coming at us, and it's kind of remarkable, this is only 27 years away, y'all. I'm not going to be here. And some of the big people that we've gotten to listen to already today and they're not going to be here. But you're going to be here. You get to work toward making the world a better place. You get to work toward increasing the flourishing of humanity globally. And I'm here to suggest that ruminant animal agriculture forage systems are the key to achieving that. So some of the things, you know, we have increased population, whatever that number is, but it's going to come from people getting to live longer, not necessarily from more babies being born than are being born now. So just incorporate that into the conversations you may hear. We need to double food production. Okay, limiting food waste is one of the options. But we need to produce more as well, and it needs to be of better quality, which is reflected by the 66% increase in demand for animal protein. It must come from virtually the same land areas today, and I have an example of how that's not right. Half of humanity will live in the tropics by 2050. How's that going to influence things? 70% of humanity will live in urban areas. We're not real good at cycling those nutrients from the human cities back to the productive lands. And by the way, plant source foods are a really inefficient way to transfer that limited resource of like phosphorus to humans. And then we don't have the return. We need to double electrical generating capacity by that time. That's one I just threw in. There are many others. I'm building a list. And the perspective in these conversations matters. If you're in the affluent north, it looks a lot different than if you're in the global south. Right? So there is this attitude that's out there that says that raising livestock and consuming animal source foods is fundamentally incompatible with sustainable development. Dr. Adeshogun said that's false. I have another phrase for it, but I won't use it because I'm trying to be polite. Livestock is essential for sustainable development goals. Here's 17 cited by the UN, and I can make the case of how livestock play in every one of those. We need to help you understand that so that you can communicate that out in whatever way you serve. And part of this is we just have this, what's the phrase? I just got this morning, mass dissonance. We have entire populations that believe things that are demonstrably not true. And if irony has an image, it's this picture of Germany tearing down a wind farm to get at the lignite that's underneath it. Because they've had this delusion about how they're going to power a modern economy. And the result is they're burning more coal now than they did before. Because at the end of the day, nobody is going to let their population starve. They're going to do whatever it takes to get the energy that they need. And this same attitude is at work in the human health, nutrition, food system conversation. We have people who are saying and driving towards things that are demonstrably not true. How can we fight back against that? Now, some of this may not be the realm for untenured faculty to operate in, but for some of us old farts that still have a campaign or two left in us, what can we do about that? So I've got 3 essential keys that guide me as I go through public advocacy. Animal source foods are essential toward public health. The more we restrict animal source foods in the diets, the worse public health gets. They're essential. Livestock are essential for sustainable food systems, and ruminant animals are particularly so. And they're essential parts of our cultures and traditions, regardless of where those cultures and traditions emanate from. There is no existing culture that's vegan. And people think of India as vegetarian. Vegetarian, y'all, means an omnivore that doesn't eat red meat. That's the definition. A vegan, it just eliminates all animal source food, and it's a completely artificial construct. We just have to figure out how to talk about these things in the public because, unfortunately, we have a lot of these messages coming against us. So one of the things I've advocated for, this was the last International Grasslands Congress, and I'm advocating for a ruminant revolution, just like we had to have a green revolution. But now it's not merely raw calories to prevent famine. It's a higher quality diet that will support the proper human development and flourishing globally. Because we really have no hope of achieving these goals without ruminant animal agriculture as a fundamental part of whatever food system, wherever that is. And again, we have this difference between public, mass public perception and hard biological, physical fact. People want to advocate for plant-based. By the way, that is a code for vegan. And if you just dig into it a little deeper, you'll see. Because already humanity's diet is plant-based. The majority of the calories in humanity's diet are coming from plants. That's globally, regardless of income level. And the majority of protein, and that's crude protein, and I hope I don't have to explain why that's important to this audience. The majority of crude protein in humanity's diet is coming from plant source foods. Now, yes, when you get to the higher income countries, you see that shift to where the majority comes from animal source, but it's not a whale of a lot. And again, we're kind of collapsing some regional differences and economic differences as we look at country level. Okay, so how much more do they want? And maybe this is the problem. In fact, I'm willing to be really controversial here and say that, this existential crisis that, 12 years until whatever, I'm not going to put a time on it, but I'm going to say that humanity's existential crisis is insufficient animal source food. And that's across income countries, low, medium, and high. I'm not saying everybody has to eat beef. I'm not saying everybody has to eat U.S. beef. I'm saying that whatever that, I have a slide I took out that said, be sure to take your daily meds, meat, eggs, dairy, seafood. Pick one, whatever. I fully respect cultural traditions. Unlike the advocates that want to enforce a global plant-only diet, whatever it is that fits people, is affordable, and is accessible, and I'm all for producing it in the regions in a way that respects and enhances the environments, okay? But we have objective evidence of too little. And I get this question, can we produce enough? And I'm saying that's the wrong question. We must do this. The penalty for continuing to not have this vast amount of our brothers and sisters getting enough animal source protein to develop properly has economic impact. It has environmental impact. And let's get into some of them. So I'm saying we must. I'm saying this is an ethical and moral imperative for us and for you if you're coming into forage and livestock agriculture. So, again, I'm willing to defend all my positions. I don't have time to do it here, and I'm happy to have the conversations. But the preponderance of highest quality scientific evidence available strongly suggests that the greatest harm associated with animal source food consumption is from not getting enough. That there is a myth about eating too much. And it's a belief system, and it's not well founded, and I'll show some things here. But there's this complete disconnect between the reality of a number of sciences, I've edited this to include nutrition, and the authoritarian designs of many, and then fill in, agitators. Right? It seems to me that the people who speak loudest about saving the world and changing the world are doing it to keep themselves from doing the hard work that it takes to improve themselves. And if we would all improve ourselves, of course, we would change the world. But that's humbling work, and that's hard work, and that's daily work. And it's easier if I point my fingers at somebody else and say, you. And I'm really tired of the us and them. There's only us. It's all team human. So, okay, onwards. One of the things it's hard for people in animal science to understand is just the vast difference between animal nutrition and human nutrition. Right? You can't do things with humans that you can do with animals. And that's with all the ethical, rightly so, things to protect animals from abusive treatments, etc. I get all that, but you just can't find large groups of genetically similar human beings that you can completely control for long periods of time, know exactly what goes into them and comes out of them, and as a friend of mine says, at the end of the day, sacrifice them to determine body composition. Hard to find volunteers for that. We call that a production cycle. So we have that data, right? And it's not a fault of human nutrition. The fault comes when they want to act as if they are doing work that's as rigorous as what you can do. And then they want to come tell us how to do what we do. So most of human nutrition shifted from the 1930s and 40s and the early part of the 50s until where we are today, where they shifted from focusing on achieving adequate essential nutrition, avoiding deficiencies, to this thing called nutritional epidemiology. We're going to record what you eat with some really weak methodology, and 40 years from now, when we see whatever diseases you have, we're going to do statistical analysis on that and try to come to some... It's completely meaningless. It's known to be meaningless within that guild. They just don't talk about it too publicly because that's awkward. So some within that guild, however, have called it mythology. It's questionnaire-based guesses. Have you ever seen one of these questionnaires? How many people here can accurately tell me what they ate all day last Monday? They do this like every couple of years. And then they process out that information, because if you say a hamburger, well, what size burger? And was there a bun on that burger? And they do games like that, and then, so they process it like they process the food, and then they come up with results that are about as good as the processed food. Nothing is measured. There's no real data, and that might explain why at least 80% of the findings from those studies fail when they get to clinical trials. Oops, 80%. If it were a coin flip, it should be 50-50. This indicates a severe bias at work here. And this is the basis of our dietary guidelines. This is the basis of school lunches. This is the basis of lots of things governing all kinds of investment. And we're not going to fix it by putting a new name on it. There's fundamental rot in this. We need to tear that out and rebuild. But in their own document, they say that this diet, this recommended diet of theirs, is not recommended for the treatment of disease. Well, we'll get to why that's important here in a little bit. Claims that red meat causes disease and this paper, weak, not meeting causality criteria, at risk of bias, contrary to common sense. And they're often dishonest. If you're not familiar with this story, again, I've got a lot I'm trying to push through. I'm happy to talk about this more. There's a belief system that's been influential in human nutrition since the beginning of the American Dietetics Association. The Seventh-day Adventists believe in this vegetarian/vegan diet as a means to ensuring the return of our Lord and Savior. Now, I'm not here to make any disparaging comments about somebody's belief system, okay? But it should be declared as a potential conflict of interest. And it isn't. And they're very proud of it because they see it as their mission. If you see anything coming out of Loma Linda University, that's a Seventh-day Adventist education. Seventh-day Adventist is the second largest private education entity behind the Roman Catholic Church globally. So we need to build bridges. Matt, I got this picture for you. I went looking for a famous North Carolina bridge. We need to build bridges we need multidisciplinary efforts, and these are difficult within our systems. But we need to find ways to build bridges. We need to stop building silos and start building lighthouses. We need to understand what constitutes a healthy diet for the metabolically well as the ill. It might be different. The essential role that animal source foods play in the development and health of human beings, the causes of non-communicable diseases, the essential role ruminant animal agriculture plays in sustainable food systems, a science-based assessment of the environmental, societal, and economic impacts of the burden of non-communicable diseases, as well as animal source food production. We stop too soon in the life cycle analysis. By the way, I'll get to it and remind me. A fresh perspective and approach toward communicating this information to the public. We are conflicted within our institutions. I can tell you about that. If you are interested, please go find the Dublin Declaration, read it, and hopefully you will feel like you agree with it and sign it. But this is an attempt to get a global document of people from these animal sciences, agricultural sciences, health, agreeing to the essential role of animal source food in human health, in ecosystems, in economies. So you can look up Dublin Declaration. When I made this slide, there's 678 signatures. We've heard about soil health and soil conservation. This is not new. This is a quote from 1938. You know, when the soil goes, we go. We understand that. But maybe, just maybe, ruminant animal agriculture in global perspective has some ecological advantages over the production of cereals, nuts, and legumes, which are being marketed as replacements for. Here's an example for you. We just had a few soccer games, didn't we? Did Brazil do anything in that? No?
Go Morocco.
Go Morocco. Okay. All right, before we get really rowdy here. So imagine that the land surface of the earth is a soccer field. Okay, people conflate agricultural land and arable land, don't they? And they say crazy things like if all that land that's being used for livestock could be used to grow soybeans, think of how many more people we could feed. There's so many things wrong with that. But here's just one example. Here's the agricultural land represented on this soccer field. Doesn't even make it to the near end of the kickoff circle, right? Here's the arable land. makes it to the penalty spot. And as Dan Glenn said in response to seeing this, yeah, and the penalty spot's getting closer and the goalie's getting nervous, right? Because we're losing arable land. Where do we expand our cities? Onto the arable land. And then, of course, we've got whatever degradation processes are going on. And again, it's not either or. Livestock are integrated into our crop farming systems. Right? We understand that. They're using byproducts or we're grazing them on fields as part of the seasonal rotation in the production cycle. But the key point is you cannot replace food production with food processors. And ruminants represent an increase and improvement in humanity's food supply. There are these tremendous upcyclers. And yet we're treating, many would have us believe, that these are somehow competitive with human beings. And again, it's not true. The truth is that we can have healthy people and healthy soils thanks to ruminant animal agriculture. How do we get better at telling that story? How can us old people get information out into the public space that then encourages the work that needs to be done in the way of policy and funding and supports, gives opportunities to young professionals? So this idea that you can be overfed but undernourished is really critical, because too many people just look at obesity as if that you're just eating too much. And that's not scientifically valid. Malnutrition today, we still have 800 million people in the world that are calorically undernourished, but we got 2.2 billion that are overweight, obese. That's malnutrition. It's just not the way we've been taught to look at it. Undernutrition, not synonymous with caloric deficit. Again, protein energy malnutrition is the most lethal form of malnutrition, and children are its most visible victims. This is unsustainable. We've got 60% of adults in the U.S. living with a chronic disease, 40% have two or more. Chronic and mental health conditions account for 90% of annual healthcare expenditures. Globally, 73% of global deaths are coming from these non-communicable diseases. This is the biggest cause of death in the world, not infectious diseases. 60% of the global burden of disease is accounted for in these metabolic disorders. Non-communicable disease could cost global economy $47 trillion by 2030. What could we do with $47 trillion? But these are all pre-pandemic figures. And our response to the pandemic did not improve these. Insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia are at least aggravating, if not causal factors. They're global in scope. Please don't repeat the idea that this is somehow a plague of prosperity. I've heard that term, exercise that. It's not true. We've always known that obesity associates more with poverty. The data's been there for half a century or more. It's global in scope. Half of adults in China, India, and the U.S., 80% of people with these conditions live in low and middle income countries. Most don't know that they're affected. So opportunity for education. Increase in type 2 diabetes, 150% by 2030. Obesity is a symptom, not the cause. We have people who are saying red meat consumption drives these. Remember what drives insulin? Is it fat? No. It's the carbohydrate that the ruminants can turn into fat for us. Is it protein? Minor. It's the carbohydrate. Children globally under 5 years old, half are deficient in micronutrients necessary for for proper development. Nearly a quarter are stunted. This is not stature only. It's cognitive development's been estimated to be an 11% of GDP drag in sub-Saharan Africa. Nearly 7% are wasted, that is, they have low weight to height, 6% are overweight. We have both occurring at the same time. This is a conundrum for people that don't understand what's going on. So let's get personal. Are you part of the 88 or part of the 12? What the heck are you talking about? Well, this study in 2019 said if you have abdominal obesity, elevated serum triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, high blood pressure, or a high fasting blood glucose, if you have one of those, or you're taking a medication for one of those conditions, you don't have optimal metabolic health. And you belong to the 88%. Can't use this slide anymore. Study just came out. It's not trending in the right direction. Now it's 93 and 7. And the leadership of various organizations, because of their paradigm, can't grasp a potential solution. So they only see diabetes as getting worse. And as I got this from the Alfalfa Congress, where there is no vision, there is no hope. And there's a really good vision that I'd like more of us to get, and that is this better health, better food, better environment. Here's good news. Drug-free remission from type 2 diabetes is a demonstrated, documented thing. And in this doctor's practice, it amounts to 50% of the people who say, yes, I'll try this. And that's drug-free remission. There were an additional 47% that got better but didn't achieve the drug-free remission. When was the last time that you heard someone say, you can get off diabetes medication? Or is the model that you're going to take this for the rest of your life? If the average adult American with type 2 diabetes could eliminate their medication use, they would reduce their carbon footprint 29% more than if they shifted from a high meat to a vegan diet. But I digest. When you improve your health, you are improving the world. We need to get people to have that message more internalized. I don't think people value their own health sufficiently. Here's some resources. I know I'm getting close. I can share these. Here's one I'll leave up. This is a link to a book list on Amazon. If you take your phone out and take a picture of it, it ought to open that list. I have no financial involvement with that. And you can find a lot of books in there. The one on the top of the list is the one I recommend for people to start with. Why We Get Sick by Professor Benjamin Bickman from BYU. All about hyperinsulinemia and its link to chronic diseases and what to do about it. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity. Happy to answer questions now or at any time. You can find Peter Ballerstedt across social media. And look forward to having some more conversations.